Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be on this spinning rock we call Earth. Welcome to the latest edition of ACSA and Craft Spirits Magazine's Craft Spirits Roundtable. I'm Jeff Cioletti. I'm editor-in-chief of Craft Spirits Magazine, and I'll be your moderator today. Just a little bit about Craft Spirits Magazine. Craft Spirits Magazine is the American Craft Spirits Association's bi-monthly digital publication, and it's the unparalleled resource for in-depth insight and intelligence for the entire craft spirits universe. The magazine features the information and analysis that small independent spirits producers and allied businesses need to operate in today's complex craft beverage market. In the most recent issue, we showcased America's best, most craft-friendly bars as selected by the greater craft spirits community. And we're very fortunate today to have the personalities behind three of those establishments on our panel. But before I introduce them, I just have a few housekeeping items. Well, we enthusiastically invite your questions for our panelists today. And if you have any questions, please write it in the chat and we'll try to get to all of your questions either at a natural break in the program or in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the webinar. You might also notice that you've been muted on entry and your video function has been disabled. We ask that you remain on mute for the duration and communicate only through the chat function. And if you want to revisit today's program or recommend it to others, it will be archived at both americancraftspirits.org and craftspiritsmag.com in the coming days. Now let's meet our panel. First, Natasha Bahrami has dedicated her years in hospitality to the category of gin, advocating as a global category ambassador, empowering the love of gin. Twice James Beard nominated, she owns the Gin Room in St. Louis and is the founder of Gin World, platform embracing brand collaboration, consumer and industry education, and engagement to elevate the category of gin around the United States. In 2021, she was inducted into the Gin Hall of Fame, and in 2025, she earned spots on 50 Best Discovery and the coveted Imbibe 75. Next, we've got Marc Figueiras, who is the beverage director at HO Restaurants, the team behind the Jersey City establishments Jane Doe, Orale, Mexican Kitchen, and Dullboy. Dullboy's the one that made our best bars list this year. His travels and work with leading distilleries and brands have given him a broad perspective on the world of spirits. With a deep background in hospitality, he's developed a keen appreciation for cocktails that tell a story, highlighting both the craft and spirit. And last but not least, Aaron Post has honed his expertise in the fields of fine dining and nightlife for more than 20 years in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Adopting the approach of playfully serving serious drinks, he pioneered his flagship cocktail bar, Valkyrie, in 2012. He followed that up with the opening of St. Vitus in 2019, and this year debuted Maestro, inspired by the land, labor, love, and love of his Caribbean travels. So, but I can only tell you so much about them. They can do a much better job introducing themselves and the bars better. So I'm going to hand it over to them for a couple of minutes just to tell us a little more about them. And we'll go in reverse alphabetical order and start with Aaron.
Hi, everybody. I'm Aaron. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Not the highest in alcohol consumption by a long ways, but we try to push still. So yeah, Valkyrie is my very whiskey centric kind of classic cocktail bar. I've got about 800 SKUs over there. Really focused on craft spirits and a large team of a lot of experts. Just trying to educate our clientele as much as we can and put delicious things in front of them. St. Vitus is a dance club. We're over there. We're just trying to push boundaries in terms of dance music culture, and immersive experiences. So we put equal priority on sound and lights and our craft cocktail program, which is mostly a draft cocktail program over there. And then the new place, Maestro, is meant to be kind of a cross section of Latin America and the Caribbean, obviously focused on agave and sugarcane spirits. My first foray into food. It's frightening, but it's working out so well. So yeah, that's me.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Aaron. Now we're gonna hear from Mark.
How you doing, everybody? I'm Mark. I live in Jersey City. I'm the beverage director of Hetero Restaurant Groups. We have three concepts. One is Orale Mexican Kitchen, where we try to guide our guests towards more craft agave spirits, raicilla, also bacanora, a whole bunch of different Mexican spirits. We also have our restaurant Jane Doe, which is our newest concept where we play with flavors like Italian flavors and Asian flavors. So a lot of Amaros, a lot of sake and shochu, highballs, and then finally I'm here for Dullboy, and that's our neighborhood cocktail bar where we do elevated cocktails, where we try our best to do elevated cocktails and kind of educate our guests on what those cocktails are and what the spirits are going into them. Um, it's a pretty relaxed atmosphere where you can kind of, nerd out a little bit about the spirits going into them, but you could also sit back and just enjoy with friends. So we try to serve elevated drinks without the pretension. So yeah, that's me, and that's what I do in Jersey City.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And now let's hear from Natasha.
Hi, dears. It's so nice to meet you. My name is Natasha, aka the Gin Girl, if you want to find me. I grew up crawling in my family's restaurant business since the very, very early 80s. So I am hardcore a restaurant child. And I would say growing up in your parents' restaurant business will drive you to drink, which is probably where I got into falling in love with the category of gin. I do own the gin room in St. Louis that is right behind me. We have hundreds and hundreds of gins in a beer and bourbon town where people said nobody drinks gin, and it was absolutely correct. So we had to spend our years educating and being very open for people to trust us and allow them to tiptoe and dive into the category of gin. We have thus exploded to really push forward around the United States. So we might come to a city near you. We're at 15 cities this year doing Gin World, which is a platform of education all around the United States. It gives me all the feels because I get to come to your cities. I actually came to Oklahoma. We actually went to Jersey this year and got to spread the love of a category of gin and craft spirits that has been so important to us. So nice to meet you all.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Natasha. And we're going to get into some questions, and I'm sure this is on a lot of people's minds who are attending today. So the first one relates to craft spirits brands themselves. So, what do you look for in a craft spirits brand, and what do you look for in a craft distiller partner? So, for instance, how would you describe that ideal relationship? What do they need to bring to the table to support the brands and support your business? That kind of thing. So, we're going to start with Natasha on this question.
Absolutely. We deeply, as the rest, work very closely with craft distilleries and distillers, and we understand this is probably the hardest thing you've ever had to do in your entire life. Those of us who really care understand what that means, and what we ask for an ideal partner is one that believes in themselves as much as you want us to believe in you, putting that kind of love and passion into every detail of what you do, and really being intentional about why you're doing what you're doing helps us. We will see that all day. It helps us to identify, oh, this is what you're so passionate about. And then when we learn your passions, we pass that forward to our guests, which in turn fall in love with you. So finding partners that actually care enough to express themselves, why they're doing what they're doing, and allowing us to see their transparency so we can meet them, meet what they're doing, really understand those things, and kind of understanding that this is a slow process. having patience with us the way you need us to have patience with you.
Excellent. And now, Aaron, what have you got to say on that topic?
I I really look for, I kind of am very swayed towards the non-novelty, um the just focus on amazing product and not trying to trend. That for me personally, I really, really appreciate, as Natasha said, the transparency whenever brands and distillers are very upfront about their processes and why they make the decisions that they do. That really appeals to me. In terms of support, just it's all the really basic stuff. Being around, doing some educational things, making sure the product is available, which is an issue in Oklahoma and probably not an issue in a lot of other places. But yeah, I think for the most part, I really just looking for just good, high quality, done the homework, and passionate about the products, and that's what really appeals to us.
Great, and we'll let Mark finish up on this topic. So, what do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Aaron. I think before you get anything done, you have to make sure that it's a great product. Like that's the start. We want it to be unique. I think you guys all said we have huge back bars, so we need these products to fit a certain hole. It's got to fit right in our program. I think that's the start. Strong story is huge for us. What makes this bottle stand out better than the next, so that I can sell it to the guest and I have a reason for putting it on my back bar. And then probably the most important thing that we look for in partnerships is education. So we're talking support through education, whether that is tastings, staff trainings, distillery visits, and we also have a pretty tight-knit community in Jersey City where we have bartenders come by and do pre-shifts with us. So we like to have brands come by and educate the whole community. And if you're on board with that, I mean, it makes for a good partnership.
All right. Now I want to ask you all what's a common mistake that craft spirits brands make and what should they be doing differently? And we'll let you continue on this, Mark.
I would say the biggest one that I see, and I've seen it quite a few times, is we develop that relationship, and that relationship is very, very strong. And we're all happy, and we're buying into the brand, and we've done all the things, and we have other restaurants buying into the brand, and then because maybe the person was doing so well, they end up moving on. And that's a brand ambassador or a rep or whatever it may be. And now the gap that is bridged to the new rep is not always good. So that means that somebody else maybe comes in and they have no idea what our relationship was. They don't know what the events that we've already done and that kind of thing. Or in worst cases, there's no replacement. So now we have no touch point to the brand. And, we're kind of left there with a relationship that we fed and watered for so long. And now it's like we have no one that we can talk to about it. So I think that bridging the gap from rep to rep or ambassador to ambassador.
All right. I'm going to ask you the same question, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, if I could follow up on what Mark is saying here, and I absolutely agree, because like the sustainability portion of it is, I think, really, really important. Um, I don't know how it is for you guys, but Tulsa's a smaller middle market, and so a lot of times what we run into is a big flash in the pan, and then all of a sudden it's just non-existent. It might be something that we have really leaned into and is kind of ubiquitous behind the bar, and now we no longer have access to it. I think one of the other things that happens too is sometimes a new brand will come in and they've seen how their product performs in a larger market, and then they'll release the entire portfolio of whatever they're bringing into the market, and it really makes it difficult to kind of get a hold on the market before pushing everything in, and then perhaps risking it not being as sustainable in the market.
All right. Now, Natasha.
Oh, the everything they said is right there. And what I also wanted to speak to, if I'm speaking directly to craft distillers, maybe newer craft distillers or those who've been doing this for a bit, one of the biggest mistakes I've seen, as we've seen many success stories as well, is owning and taking care of your own backyard, your own cities, the city that you or state that you are in, and really watering that garden, making sure your own city is being nurtured in a way as hopefully they are taking care of you as well. I've seen too many times where we try to, as craft brands, grow too quickly in adjacent or markets around the United States because we need that income coming in or we need to grow. But as we've all kind of said, having that direct connection, whether it's through a representative or such, is really the relationship building, at least those of us who are greatly in tune to supporting and helping craft distilleries shine. We hope to have that relationship built with you. So I see the most successful craft distilleries really building deep in their own cities, in their own backyards. With us doing 15 cities this year around the United States, whether it was Oklahoma or Jersey, there was plenty of local craft distilleries that I saw all over the bars and restaurants in those cities. And I felt that that was quite a success with that. And really, it helps push even the other cities that you're going to around the United States, having that core relationship building in your own cities is also going to help and project around the United States.
And I want to talk a little bit about the role that packaging plays in your brand selection. What makes a really great bottle aesthetic, and sort of on the negative side of that, what sorts of packaging concepts do you avoid, whether that's from a visual or just a general functionality standpoint? And I'm going to ask this to Aaron first.
Well, honestly, I can't go further without plugging someone who's actually in the room right now, Derek Duty. The wonderful experience out of Guthrie, Oklahoma, has this amazing aesthetic, and it doesn't matter like if we're pulling it out of the well or off the back bar. It's the fajita effect. Like the second you pull it down, everyone's like, "Well, I'm gonna have whatever is in that bottle." So I definitely would say that like doing something very fresh and outside of the box, like it's there's a lot of value, but it has to be backed up by the intrinsic value of the product itself. And on the flip side of it, back to my comment earlier about transparency, like it would be so nice to have more information direct from the producer about the product that's in that glass. We see it a lot in obviously agave spirits. You want to know what's in the bottle and what's happening in it. You just turn it around, which is a really nice thing because online you're usually swimming through a sea of marketing and misinformation. So it's really nice just to have a direct approach, saying like we want you to know exactly what's in this bottle without having to pull your phone out or get online.
Right. And Natasha, what do you think?
Yes, I wanted to touch on some things that by kind of if you're trying to be something unique or stand out, sometimes we make the mistake of having the pores or the mouths of the bottles be a little bit too wide for standard pours is something that sometimes is a mistake that happens with craft distilleries, because we as bartenders or bar teams really want to be able to put a uniform bottle pourer on our bottles. And when we can't get that, I know I've heard a lot of my counterparts say, I love this, or I kind of really like it, but it's the ability for me to pour it on my rail is a little difficult when I can't put the uniform bottle pourers on. That is something very important to know. How heavy your bottle is aesthetically is okay. Maybe it's really beautiful, but if it comes with like that extra level layer of glass on the bottom, if it has a very short neck and it's harder for bartenders to pour, that is something that is often fatiguing with bartenders as well, just to give information there. And then lastly, when it comes to aesthetics, we as the gin room and the gin girl, we try to teach consumers to think outside of that bottle as well. We do massive blind tasting seminars or 5 to 30 spirit seminars where we're asking consumers or industry to look outside of the branding and marketing that is there, and allowing them to really taste what's in the bottle rather than pulling directly on what they see. However, when they're going into a retail shop, aesthetics is what people are looking for. So it is a fine line between it being a beautiful standout bottle and one that can be used on a high level, meaning many depletions in your bar, is that it needs to be able to be easily used, not too heavy, have consistent pouring abilities to it. So it's this balance that's important.
Okay. Mark, here to chime in.
Yeah, I think you guys hit the majority of the things I was gonna talk about, but I agree with both of you. For me, simple is sometimes best, not always. There's always, exceptions to that rule. I have a bunch of decanters that I love the liquid that comes in it. But with that being said, sometimes these new products that come with the big flashy bottle, I immediately am like, maybe red flag. What is going on here? If this is a small company that didn't have a ton of money, where did you spend your money? Did you spend your money on the bottle, or did you spend the money on the juice going into the bottle? Again, not always the case. I'm not saying that is always what is going on. I'm just, sometimes when I see it, I get very worried because I'm like, I know how expensive these things are to make. If you had, do you have enough budget to do both really well? If you do both really well, great. It's great for the guest to see. It stands out on the back bar. But I would agree with Natasha, some of those big bottles as well. Like, I can't really put them in my bar program because I can't pour from them. And all of my bartenders are yelling at me about, I don't know what your liquor laws are there, but we really aren't supposed to be removing liquor from bottles to put into another bottle. So it becomes hard when it's very cumbersome. But I think, at the base, it's simple is best. Clear labeling. I want to know. I agree with Aaron. I want to know what's in the bottle. Tell me what's in the bottle. If it's a whiskey, tell me how long it's aged for if you can, or what kind of barrel it was in. What's the mash bill? Like, if I know the mash bill on the bottle, I can educate my guests and my servers and my bartenders right away. So transparency is key with bottling, I would say.
Can I say one last note?
Of course.
Be willing. It's something that not everyone's doing right now. Slap a QR code on it. Slap a QR code on it that takes you to some page that gives information about your distillery. Maybe not the homepage of your website, but something that really talks about your whiskey or your rum or your gin in a way that is very impactful. I think that is the one thing that is consistently missing from a lot of the bottles. Everyone's using QR codes these days. And I know it needs to go through the TTB, but start from the beginning, have it on there. And you might see a lot of traffic that is coming through those QR codes.
And since this is pertinent to the discussion right now, I'm not going to save this audience question for the end. I'm going to ask it now. can any of you share any examples of craft brands that are getting these strategies right? Is anybody brave enough to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are we gonna get some show and tell?
She's just yeah.
Well, it's just you got to kind of see these both had different bottles, okay? These both had different bottles to them and they fixed them. This is, again, don't worry about the brand. It's technically Blue Coat, but we're not here to talk about the brand. But do you see it has a long little neck where I can use it? It cut off the bottom so it doesn't have a heavy glass bottom here. And it's just an easy wrist pour like this. That's just easy to use. And the bottle is relatively light. Another one, this is Citadel out of France. It used to have a heavy bottling. They changed it into this longer neck, a light bottle, something that shows their brand front and center, yet it's simple and they're relatively beautiful, right? You can show them, it jumps off of a back bar, but it's just easy to use, and whiskey and things have those as well.
Okay. You guys got anything you want to add to that, or should we?
I would say one of the examples that I've really appreciated recently that it's in my repeating theme of transparency is New Riff. I feel like New Riff is like very, very upfront about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and just saying, you know, kind of taking the approach of we made this for somebody. If you like it, that's great. If you don't, that's also okay. But this is what we're passionate about, and I just really appreciate it. It's one of my favorite brands right now, and I feel like they're doing a great job of just saying it is what it is, you know.
I could add one, I don't know if it quite fits, but it's Brooklotti. It's not American craft, but it is, Isla Scotch. They have a QR code on there that feeds in, tells you mash bill, tells you where it was aged, tells you where they got the barley from. They're using a lot of terroir driven barley in their stuff from the island, and they're talking about that as well. It's pretty cool to just like scan the QR code and hear everything or see everything about the bottle.
Definitely an
Right.
advantage for right now. If you guys are starting off new, go ahead and throw a QR code on there from the beginning. Definitely a good recommendation.
Right, that's great advice. And let's kind of talk more now about specific cocktail and spirits consumers, and I want to kind of talk about Gen Z a little bit. A couple weeks ago, IWSR released the results of some recent research, and they found that, lo and behold, Gen Z are not actually turning their backs on beverage alcohol consumption, as had been previously the prevailing narrative. So I want to kind of get your own experience with Gen Z consumers, as they become increasingly of legal drinking age. They started to test the waters in bars a little bit. And I've heard a bunch of amusing stories from some bartenders about their own experiences with Gen Z, and like almost like fish out of water stuff going on with Gen Zers. So I want to hear what you've witnessed, and we'll start with Natasha first on this.
Um, as I think we've all probably been in this a long time, I think the newer generation that's coming out right now, whether it's blaming TikTok or things like that, I do actually think they're coming out a little bit more educated or a little bit more open-minded and willingness to listen and learn from their bartender. I think they're going to their bartender to say, hey, maybe I'm new at this, but I'm actually kind of really excited and willing to learn. Is this new generation seems to be, in our experience, excited to learn the little nuances. They've also seemed to be excited about craft or knowing where their spirits are coming from. I think that's something definitely coming out of the new generation and being rubbed off on the older generation.
Okay, and Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I'll be honest here though. Gen Z worries me a little bit. Like, I do see the drinking kind of like going down moderation. I think it's a great thing. I'm behind it. Like, I think it's great to be a moderate drinker, but it turns out that the industry we're in, it kind of hurts us a little bit. So I'm just going to be honest about it. It's scary to me. I have seen a dip. Our restaurants are not focused towards, you know, Gen Z quite yet. We're like 28 plus for the most part. Doesn't mean we don't get any younger people. It just means like majority of the people that are coming in are a little bit older. But with that being said, there is a silver lining. I do think that they're adventurous drinkers, and I think that they are really open to trying new things. Like, I've experienced so many people my age, a little bit younger and a little older, being like, all right, what bourbons you got? What new bourbons you have? This, that, third. Gen Z coming in and they're like, I had an agricole rum in this place. I had a really good cool Satal here. Do you have something like that? And they're very experimental. And I love that. It's a breath of fresh air. Also, I think a lot of them are making drinks in their own homes. I don't know if it's a budget thing or what it may be, but I'm seeing a lot of these young cats come in and they're talking about the daiquiri riff that they're making, and they know how to make it, they know how to talk about it, and I think it's kind of nice. So I don't think it's all bad, but it is a little worrisome, if I'm going to be honest.
Aaron, do you see that
Yeah,
too?
sure. I mean, I agree with both of you. I think that we kind of had a hard reset on this side of the pandemic, and where we took a lot of things for granted pre-pandemic, and kind of had a hard like a start over in terms of education on on this side of it. But I agree, like this younger population is much more conscientious of what they're putting into their bodies. Not and an aspect to that is maybe a trend towards drinking less, but just conscientious in general. Like, they want to know what it is. So I've seen a lot more inquisitiveness, and it's also inspired us to make sure that we've got NA versions of each, or of as many cocktails on our current menu as we possibly can, and that's been a really, really nice exercise for us, and it works. um, I think the biggest thing with the Gen Z consumers that I've noticed, that has nothing to do with craft spirits production, is they won't leave tabs open at all, ever. So if we could just put a label on the spirits bottle that says, "Hey, leave your tab open," it's fine.
There you go.
Are they worried about leaving their card there?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Because I do that at least once a year, so to go back the next morning. Um, Especially when I'm traveling, it's a lot of fun too, because I'm almost on my way to the airport, and then I have to go to the bar I was at last night to get my credit card back. Um, all right, let's kind of move on to some talk about cocktails. I just want to hear some insight from all of you on what are the prevailing cocktail trends that you've witnessed, flavor trends, spirits trends, garnish trends, anything related to a cocktail. And let's like hear some of your own cocktail creations that align with those trends. So we'll go with you, Mark, first.
I guess I would start with like the not so fun one, but I love it, is the return to classics. I feel like we see this every few years, and I'm just so delighted every time, because I feel like after a long week, a long shift, when you go to your local bar, you really don't want to talk, or I don't really want to talk to the bartender about his new signature. Maybe another day, but I want to just sit down with a classic cocktail and enjoy the people around me, maybe talk about the shift or whatnot. So I love the return to classics. Um, we're doing a freezer door martini in Jane Doe right now, which is it's a riff on a classic, but it's a martini with the dilution with tomato water, and we're adding a bit of koji for a bit of like umami and salinity on it, and I think it's really nice. And it's a nice, easy bridge for someone that drinks martinis already, and we can bridge them into something that's unique, but also kind of in their wheelhouse. The other one that I really love right now is the savory trend. I'm playing a lot with that, like how to balance cocktails with, savory ingredients is really fun, and it lends to a more complete cocktail. So, something that we've worked on, I'm sure you guys do this as well. It's a drink that I've made already, but kind of like revisiting. This is a miso strawberry syrup that I'm doing. So sous vide strawberries with a red miso paste. And then the base of that cocktail is a bourbon and an Amaro. And we're doing like a sour. So really nice round cocktails. And I think it's nice to put like a miso strawberry sour in front of somebody. I think back to like 15 years ago, if I put a drink in front of somebody and I was like, there's miso in this, they would be like, what are you talking about? Like, but now we've kind of came to this place in cocktails where some of these ingredients are kind of normal, and it's fun to see. I could get into like the clarified trend, and I love that as well. I think clarifying cocktails just lends so much flavor and so much roundness to drinks, and I think it's something that's here to stay. Real quick, we have a drink that my bar manager at Dullboy made that's like beet, plum, goat cheese, herbes de Provence, and cacao. And that would not work if you just threw all those things together and just, tried to make a cocktail with it. It'd probably make it work, but it would be harder. But with clarification and using some of these washes that we do, it really rounds out the drink. And I think it's a trend that will continue to stay and be very applicable in the future.
All right, Aaron, what have you got?
I really like the evolution. I feel like we went from classics to esoteric ingredients, and then to this kind of maximalism and overcharged stuff, turning everything up to 11. I feel like I agree with Mark. We're returning to a focus on classics, but also a level of sophistication that we haven't seen before. People are taking a much more gastronomic like approach to creating these drinks, whether they're based on actual dishes or particular ingredients that they want to showcase. And like more so than ever, as techniques are honed and there's more and more wisdom and more kind of across the board knowledge about how to put these things together. Like we're getting more and more cocktails that are greater than the sum of their parts, and that's really, really refreshing to see. I'm loving bars like Mace in New York. That's just like this cocktail is an expression of this ingredient, or something like Super Bueno, where it's like you read the menu and it reads 3 ingredients, but there's probably 16 in there, and it just blows your mind. So I'm just really, really excited about this kind of sophistication that we're getting, and kind of more of a gastronomic approach that I'm seeing across the board.
All right, your thoughts, Natasha?
Yes, I love the complexities that are coming out, but what I've also noticed is that not only it's been kind of an ask or a demand from consumers and guests, but I've seen bartenders leaning more to the spirit-driven cocktail, and the flavor profiles in those particular spirits. And I think this is relevant to craft distilleries where you are or often are able to create distinctive products, things like that, where both the bartenders and the bar teams are picking out not only, oh, I need bourbon or scotch or gin in this cocktail, but I need this particular bourbon or scotch or gin or rum in it because of the flavor profiles. I'm not saying this is crazy new or different. I'm seeing that this is kind of a trend that's happening on menu, where that if you put this one, I'm going to use just gin because it has such a range of flavor profiles. if you use this particular SKU, maybe your craft brand in this cocktail, it does something completely different than just the run-of-the-mill Maker's Mark. Okay, not that Maker's Mark isn't great, but really, I've been often seeing a little bit more distinction in the product that's being used in the cocktails. And so that's actually a really strong benefit for craft producers, because it's something that it often with craft producers, you have the ability to make something a little bit more distinctive. And I have seen the trend of bartenders or bar teams going towards that. The other one is long drinks. I've seen a trend go towards. As we've noticed, people are drinking less or lower ABV. Long drinks are something where, I mean, unless you have a straw and you're just chugging it anyway, but long drinks are allowing people to kind of take longer with their engagement, maybe a social experience type of thing. But that also means the base spirit needs to be able to hold up to those long drinks. And so, really creating flavor profiles within your spirit that can hold up to being mixed in that way.
Great. So now we talked cocktails, but now I want to switch it over to neat pours. And it can be very instructive on where consumers are going, just what they're ordering in their neat pours. So, what are people ordering neat? How has that evolved? And what does that tell you about consumer tastes? What really gets them to spend more on a neat, or, I'll include on the rocks in this too, even though technically not neat, but neat or on the rocks. And Natasha, one thing I'm particularly curious about is I've long been an advocate of drinking gin neat, but I don't know if the market's really caught up with me. So so you don't have to talk about gin, but just let me.
Totally.
Yeah,
I'll absolutely, and I'll talk about just in general spirits
yeah.
as well. But we clearly, when we do our blind tastings, we do 30 gins that are tasted room temperature and neat. So there's definitely a time and place to help that in understanding distinctions there. So I would say gin hasn't quite caught up to the neat pour or shot realm, though it probably would help depletions on the category of gin if it was. However, I think going back to the first questions you asked us with what do we look for in a craft distiller or spirit partner, is really what having a story, having like your passion shown to us or expressed to us, that we can also fall in love with you and share those stories with our guests. Whether I have 350 whiskeys, right, or 450 gins, you're going to ask me, can you show me something that is just going to like really blow my mind here? Make sure that I have an opportunity to tell your story, like to tell what's so cool. When guests come from around the United States to the gin room in St. Louis, they're like, okay, I know a lot of these gins. I have 50 gins in my personal collection, right? But can you show me something that is just very distinctive? I'm going to pull a local gin, a craft gin that was on my shelf that I know their story. I'm passionate and I feel and I trust towards their storyline, and I'm going to pick that up and I'm going to tell my stories towards it. I'm going to tell your stories towards it, but I do need to have that kind of connection with you in order to do that. So I think the consumers are getting excited about what we're excited about. And what we're excited about are those connections we've made to our craft distillery partners. The reason why we're successful it's because you make amazing things that allow us to be successful. So,
Right. So, Aaron, what's neat around your parts?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with Natasha. It's like what we are excited about. That's what our clientele is drinking. You know, our guests are coming in to hear what we're into. So, you know, there's a part of it that's just like built around the culture of the room, saying like all trends point towards, you know, rye and bourbon. But obviously at Maestro, it's all, I mean, mostly agave spirits. So first and foremost, they're drinking what we're excited about. I think that like in reference to the question of like what gets them to spend more or be more exploratory, I read that as like what gets them to dive a little bit further into the uh the category. And I feel like one of the biggest ones is how it's served to the guests. You know, is it in proper glassware? Is there any pageantry associated with it? Is the bottle being presented with it? Is it served with spring water? Because especially if someone is younger, and if we're referencing like Gen Z as we were earlier, it's like we want to make sure that those first few experiences of them getting to experience like unadulterated craft spirit is that's best it could possibly be. So I very much encourage like, hey, proof this down with water to whatever proof is really comfortable for you, because it's more important that you enjoy this first experience rather than not proofing it down saying, well, I don't want to do that again. So yeah, I think that they're drinking whatever we're excited about, and I think it's our job to make sure that it's as palatable as it possibly can be.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, I think, I hate to say it, but I agree with both of them fully. I have in my notes here, it's all about the story. People aren't, if you could afford a nice expensive pour out at a bar, you probably have some of those things at home. So first comes to mind, it's like barrel proof or age statements or limited edition, this or that. But I don't really think those, you could charge more for those and you can make some money off of those or whatever. But I think it's really about what are we drinking? Because that's what my guest wants to know. And they want to say, hey, Mark, what are you drinking at the house right now? And it might be something weird that they're not really into. I sold a guest on a pour of Mexican mango brandy the other day because I thought the story was cool. It was simple. It was just that the Mescalero agave didn't turn out really well this year. So he used the mango tree in the backyard for this specific batch of mango brandy. And the guests loved that. And it was something that they haven't tried before. And I think it was maybe a little bit outside of what they normally drink, but I think they liked the story and they liked the connection with myself and the other gentleman behind the bar that was drinking it. So yeah, I think it's all about the story. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of mango bird, I know Ryan Hall in Chicago, they make a really good mango eau de vie that's,
They
you
make it
know,
better.
they kind of play around with some really interesting fruits that most people wouldn't even touch. So I
I
think that's
love that
just,
brandy. I love that
yeah,
brandy.
it's really good stuff. All right. So, um, there are a few questions in the audience, so I'll try to get to all of those. And the first of those, um, all right. Craft spirits category is now in its mature phase. Has consumer perception of craft changed since 10 to 15 years ago when the category was in its infancy? And I guess who should I call on for this? Natasha, let's start with you on this.
um, I would say most definitely things have crazy change since the late 1990s and the early 2000s in regards to craft. I also think a good thing has happened. We have honed in on like the important things that guests are looking for in spirits. Distillers and new distillers and distilleries now have so many avenues and people like the American Craft Spirits Association, things like that, where you can lean on and have people help you through things. So you're not reinventing a wheel every time you're doing it. And I think that's really helped create better spirits that are coming out. What are people's or our feelings towards craft spirits since like 20 something years ago? I would say we're expecting more. I would say we have a little less tolerance for things not really being where they need to be when it's in bottle and being presented as a fully finished brand. We're very helpful with that, but really understanding that our current consumers are expecting a lot right now. They want you to have your branding right. They want you to have your projection right. They want you to have your story right, and they want you to have your flavors right. And so I think that does put a lot of pressure on new craft distilleries and craft brands. But I think guests and consumers and bartenders are still very excited about craft spirits, and even more so than the big national brands. We're excited to know where our products are coming from and building those relationships with craft brands.
All right. Aaron, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Natasha. It's the everything is under a microscope, and we feel like an unrelenting pressure for it to be perfect. I'm sure the spirits producers are feeling that as much as we are. Um, I think the biggest thing is education. 15 years ago, there were only a couple dozen legitimate cocktail books, and if you wanted to learn about anything, like you had to uh, be looking at the right blog. If you guys remember blogs, so, yeah, I think that like there's just so much more information now that people have access to, that education part of it is really changed the landscape of it. And to you know revisit the whole transparency thing, I think that's part of what's driving it, is like we have access to so much information. So when something new comes across our plate, the first thing we want to do is, or at least what I want to do, is deep dive and learn everything I can about it. So yeah, so I think that just the access to so much more is really changed things.
Cool. Mark, any last thoughts on this question?
Educated consumer, they know what they're buying. They're not, I think it's more the same where we had a big craft renaissance, you know, 15, 20, 25 years ago, where like craft beer was huge. The guest was accepting a lot more things and some flawed things, to be honest. And I don't think they're accepting that anymore. And I also think that the distilleries mostly have picked up their game quite a bit. So I think it's all, working well together.
And the next audience question, what are the top three pain points you have experienced this year as a bar? Um, Mark, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I would say people generally start the new year drinking a little bit less. That's hard. Costs are very hard to deal with right now. It might be our area, maybe not, but like it's tough. Rent has been going up and up and up. And in Jersey City, it's very, very hard to buy your building if you're a small business. So we don't own any of our buildings, and it's tough to have something else dictated by someone else. It's out of our control. I guess, yeah, I think cost lines would probably be the biggest thing, and trying to deliver maybe the misconception of some of our craft cocktail bars. The guest doesn't understand sometimes that they think we're expensive because we charge more, but in reality, we're making less of a profit than their corner bar. But explaining that to a guest and educating the guest on that is difficult, and it's touchy. So yeah, I would say cost lines are tough. Staffing is also always a challenge. We have an incredible staff, in all of our restaurants, so I can't complain about our staff. They're fantastic, but we're New York City little brother. So I'm sure you guys know where Jersey City is, but it's right across the Hudson. So we train a lot of these folks up in our bars, and we get them to a certain point, and sometimes they end up leaving for greener pastures in New York City, some of the top cocktail bars in the world. So it's hard to be that, in between sometimes, because you lose a lot of good people and you're happy for them when they leave to go to Super Bueno or when they leave to go to Katana Kitten. It's fantastic, but it's hard to lose really strong players as well.
Aaron.
Pain points. Yeah. I mean, I will agree that the financial burden I mean, we're all kind of standing around going like, when and how will this end? The couple concrete examples I can give you is, when I opened my second place in 2019, it cost twice as much to open as my first place. And when I opened Maestro this year, it cost 4 times as much as Valkyrie to open. Insurance is just absolutely ridiculous, but that has nothing to do with craft spirits. I feel like from an experiential standpoint, it's like one of the biggest things that I feel like we feel in the room is, and this may be more a personal thing. So I feel like we were one of the last vestiges of people physically cohabitating a space and participating in like real human fellowship. We had this big thing where, post pandemic, we were all still on QR code menus, and we all of a sudden just pushed really hard to return everything to paper. And what we found is that everyone is now communicating with each other in the room and better and engaging with our staff a lot more too. But I definitely feel like pushing against this trend that we've never been more connected and we've never been more alone, and in spaces like bars where they're built for people to gather and enjoy each other. It's like, that's kind of a constant thing that we're feeling and trying to push against.
All right, Natasha, pain points.
I'll keep it short and sweet. Lately it's been, it's even in the last year, getting, we have plenty of guests who are amazing and wonderful, but I think we've all felt a little bit of a downturn of people coming out to cocktail bars versus drinking at home. And you could say, oh, that's a personal problem, but it's really not. Because if bartenders aren't given the opportunity to engage with guests, it's really hard to advocate or connect with them in the importance of, spirits as more of a social or a thing rather than just drinking alcohol. So really understanding this social environment of bars and restaurants and allowing ourselves to be more approachable when both Aaron and Marc have communicated how hard it is to stay affordable as a cocktail bar or any bar in general.
All right, we're at the top of the hour, but I want to squeeze this one last question in, because it is in itself kind of a pain point. We often hear that the largest hurdle for distilleries is distributors. What are your respective experiences with your local distributors as it relates to ordering craft products? So, Natasha, we'll go with you first on this one.
I would say that we're personally, and I shouldn't speak for them, but I think we covet our relationships with the distribution that allow us to work well with them. But there's some that we just won't work with because they don't know how to participate with us well. So I would say distribution is a large problem, especially with a lot of the larger distribution having issues right now that you've maybe all read in the what's coming out right now. But I would say distribution and finding the right distribution partner, whether it's the small craft distribution or the larger one, to make sure they're not inhibiting your growth. I think that is one of the most important relationship decisions that a brand makes to help them succeed. So, yeah.
All right, Aaron.
Yeah, and I agree with Natasha on this. I think that we are in a little bit of a different scenario. In Oklahoma, we're so low in the ranking for consumption that that there's not a whole lot of competition, and there's not a whole lot of push to make sure that even pretty ubiquitous products are kept sustainably on shelves. So if I could reference something that I would referenced earlier, it's this idea that if you believe in a product and you're trying to push it into maybe a smaller middle market, maybe release just one of your portfolio and get a foothold and get the right partnership with the distributor to make sure that it's not only going to be in the market but also sustainably in the market.
And Marc, I know New Jersey's distribution situation pretty well, so I'm really curious to hear.
It's wild. It's wild. I have to say though, I love 90% of my distributors. We have great relationships. They bring me things and people that are great opportunities for our restaurants and things that I want to taste and I want to see, and opportunities for, support in all different ways. So our distributors are good. Sometimes you have, the bad apples where you get bottles put in front of you where you're like, why are you showing me this or whatever, Dave? But for the most part, we've had really great relationships in the last few years with our distributors, and we can't really complain about anything. I do think it is very important to, as a craft distillery, to get in the right just on the right distributor in New Jersey, because majority of New Jersey uses 2 distributors. I use a whole lot more than that because we just use a whole lot of different products. But if you're not in the right, I had a company, well, I shouldn't mention names, but I had a company come to me recently and say they just came out on the market to New Jersey and they joined with X company, and that company sells nothing of value to most craft cocktail bars. So you're not going to get into craft cocktail bars because they'd have to open an account for one product. So I think it's very important who you surround yourself as far as a distributor goes.
Great. So now that about wraps things up. We're just about out of time, but before we go, I'd like to invite everyone to read more about America's Best Bars in the current issue of Craft Spirits Magazine. If you don't already have a free subscription to the digital publication, head over to craftspiritsmag.com, sign up for one. The link to each issue will show up in your inbox every other month, and you can also check out the archives. We also would like to invite you to join us in Washington, D.C. this September 9th to 10th for ACSA's legislative fly-in as we work together to advance craft spirits on Capitol Hill. You'll have the opportunity to meet face-to-face with leadership from TTB and share industry priorities directly with members of Congress. No prior advocacy experience is required, and ACSA will provide a full briefing to get you up to speed on all the key issues that can impact our economic future. Registration is required, but it's complimentary. For members, register at the ACSA website. Specific link is right there on the screen. And I'd like to once again thank our amazing panelists today, Natasha, Marc, and Aaron. And I'd, of course, like to thank all of you in the audience for attending. Please, we'll be doing a lot more of these Craft Spirits Roundtables in the future, and I hope you can all attend those as well. So enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers, everyone.